My favourite way to play Football Manager is to set a tactic and then recruit the best players I can find to fit that tactic. To do that, I've developed a small amount of code in Python, which in this video, I'll demonstrate how to use. And if you're interested in doing the same, you'll find the code and all the various FM files like filters and views and tactics in the description to this video that you can download. Okay, so we start off by looking at our squad and figuring out how good the players are in our squad. And that's the basis on which we go on to figure out if new players we might buy are better than the players we already have. So here we are with QPR. This is the second year of a save on the FM24 beta, and here's the squad. What I'll do is a couple of quick things. I will add all the players in the squad. We don't have much of a youth team now. I've reduced the squad down fairly significantly in the time I've been the manager of QPR, and I also set up the correct view. So we've got a view here called All Attributes Squad, linked to this in the video description. And all this is doing is it is setting out all the attributes that a player has, and then what we will do is take this out of the game. We need this data out of the game. So the way we do that is fairly simple. You just click anywhere, not on any of the players' names, but just anywhere sort of blank, but in the middle of the data, like here. And then on a Mac, I'll press Apple and A. If I was on a PC, I'd press Control and A. And all that's doing is selecting all of the lines on the page. So that's now been done. So if I press Apple and then P, and again on Windows it would be Control and P, it brings up the print screen dialog box. It's the same thing you would get if you go up here and click print screen here, but again, just to do it quickly again, click in the middle, Apple A, Apple P, pretty quick process. You get these three options. If you put print web page and click OK, it then gives you this dialog box asking you where would you like to put it. So you need to just find a place to put it, and so you know where it's gone. So for me, the way I've got this set up, I like to put it in a folder on my desktop. So I put it in here. I go back 4 clicks on, this is on a Mac, and I click desktop, and I've got a thing called FM files and desktop. Then it asks me to name it. Now, the way that I've got this set up, you can name it absolutely anything you like, because the code in a minute is just going to look for the most recent file that's been put in the folder. So it doesn't matter what it's called. So I just hit the keyboard, any buttons, doesn't matter, and click save. So now I've got something in a folder, which is what I've just created. This is the most recent one. I now need to tell Python to look at it, read it, and calculate some scores. The way I do that, I go into something called Jupyter Notebook, which you can see here on the screen. And Jupyter Notebook is a way to run Python code, and the code is here on the screen. And I won't go through the code in detail, but simply put, what this code is telling the computer to do is look in that folder where I've just put a file, read the most recent file, look at what it says, and then calculate how good the players are for my Football Manager tactics. So I'm going to run this code, and then I ask it to spit out a file which I can then read a bit more easily. So I go back into the folder. This was the file I created out of Football Manager. Python's now read it, and it spit out its own file, which is this one. And now I can read this in the browser, this one here. And this is my squad again, my QPR squad. You can see under the heading club, all the players play for QPR. But what we've got now is lots of data about them, and in particular on the right here we've got a bunch of different scores, and these ones on the right hand side are how good they are at the different positions in my tactic. So for example, who's the best goalkeeper in my squad? We've got a little sort function here, click that a couple of times, and it tells me that the best goalkeeper in my squad with a score of 12.5 is a guy called Liam Roberts. And if we go back into the squad, sure enough, if we go into the tactic, there's our best 11, and here's Liam Roberts, and he's our best goalkeeper. Now, I'll come on in a minute to what the scoring is doing, but put simply, it's looking for these green numbers to be high. It looks a little bit less at the blue numbers, and then there are a few attributes I particularly focus on. So in this case, agility and reflexes, and so it's looking at whether or not this goalkeeper is the best goalkeeper in the squad for agility and reflexes, and so on. So we can do that for goalkeepers, we can do it for full-backs like this, we can do it for centre-backs like this, our central midfielders, the game called it segundo volante, like this, and then our strikers like this. So that's the QPR squad that we are the manager of. One point to note is I've kept the tactic pretty simple, so there are relatively few roles in it. Goalkeeper role, a central defender role, a fullback role, a wingback role, a central midfielder role, or a striker role. So in this save, QPR second season, we're top of the championship in the January transfer window. The previous season, finished mid-table with a weak squad and financial difficulties. We sold players where we could. The fees that came in dealt with the financial difficulties. We recruited a cheaper squad, mostly free transfers. And now in January of year 2, we're top of the championship. Anyone we bring in from here really needs to be good enough to play in the Premier League. And it's also good to spot the gaps in the squad where we've got players who are clearly not going to be good enough for the Premier League. So the way that we can do that is look at the Premier League and look at the club that's just surviving, which in this case is Leicester City. And we can go through exactly the same approach of assessing their squad. So we pull the data out in the same way, and we ask Python to read the data. So this is the same thing I did before. I'll just do it a little bit more quickly. Run the code. That will spit out this folder. Now this is the Leicester players. And so for example, if you look at the goalkeeper for Leicester, he's a 13.2. And then you can look at all the various other positions. Here's their fullbacks. This guy's a defensive midfielder, but here's two fullbacks, 13.6 and 13.5, and so on. The way that I look at that is I make a simple table. This is the table. So here's our squad, the QPR squad. Try to keep 2 players per position, and even sometimes fewer than that. So for example, here's the 3 centre-backs, and we've got 3 players that can play centre-back as the starters, and then we have 1 or 2 reserves. And keep the squad small, keep financial control. We've then got a number next to each player. There's our goalkeeper. QPR goalkeeper was 12.5. And then what I've said over here, here's the Leicester equivalent. So Leicester's goalkeeper, for example, is 13.2. And if I go back just to look at this, and again, just quickly, here's the goalkeepers. There's the goalkeeper, Liam Roberts, 12.5. And here's the Leicester goalkeeper, Hamanson, 13.2. So we can look at the squad and we can get a sense for where the gaps are. And my view at the moment when I look at this, the biggest gap is here. This player, Clark Salter, is our left-sided centre-back. I like to have our left-sided centre-back having a good left foot. And a Premier League centre-back is something like 13.2 or maybe 13.6 on the score system, whereas our guy, Clark Salter, is only 12.4. So what I'll do now is I'll go on to see if we can find a player who will be a better fit for that position than Clark Salter is, and then we'll figure out how to go from there. Just before coming off this screen, one is these scores that I'm using that are calculating are obviously not super precise. So the idea that a 13.1 is much better than 12.9 that's not what it's for. It's just to give a broad sense, and then when we come to look at other players that are not QPR or Leicester players, but in the whole of the world in the game, then we can sort of do a quick and dirty ranking on the players in terms of how well aligned they are to be in our club. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, just to know from a squad composition point of view, and anyone that's been managing in Football Manager 24 in England will know that there's this new quirk of the game with so-called ESC slots, which is the 4 slots you can get of players that haven't got work permits or wouldn't qualify for a work permit. And it's worth noting that this guy, Clark Salter here, that we're going to look to replace is English. So I include English in here just to remind myself how many players I've got. To get all 4 ESC slots with the rules as they now are, you need 35% of your players to be England eligible. So 35% of an 11 is 3.8. So basically 4 players in every team you put out need to be on average England eligible to make sure you can get all 4 of those slots. And in the Championship in particular, the players you can bring in on ESC slots are really good value for money. So there's a whole dynamic there. I'm not going to do that in this video, but you have to think about the work permits. And I like to do it like this just to make sure I'm thinking that through. Take the goalkeeper, for example. We probably would improve on the goalkeeper in the Premier League, but I wouldn't want to do it now because we've got a guy who's English filling the minutes. And so I want to make sure we've currently got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 English players in that starting 11 and accounting for injuries and so on. I want to make sure that coming into the Premier League, we've got all 4 of those ESC slots because that's quite important in terms of the financial side of the game and making sure that we can bring in the best value players possible. So let's find a left-footed centre-back that might be able to replace Clark Salter. So the first thing is I normally keep the scouting range off because it's just for cost, where we've got a smaller budget club. But we'll put this on World, and you can do this just for the day, take all the data out and turn it off again if you want to. And now we've got a load of players, and then I like to use a filter. So what I'll do is I'll clear all this, and then down here I've got a bunch of different filters. Again, these are in links in the description. You can download these filters, same ones that you've got here. And we're looking for a centre back. So in a journeyman save, I've got again the goalkeeper, the centre back, the full back, the central midfielder, and I gradually tweak them as I make my way around the journeyman. But this is the filter for a centre back, and it's looking at a whole bunch of the attributes which are either green or blue on the player card, and then there's a weighting that Python comes on to use later. This is just making sure the sort of baseline of you want a player that can tackle at a decent level, mark, heading, all the things that the player needs to be able to do are a decent baseline, and just filtering out all the players in the game population are not. So you can tweak these as you think fit. I can see here there's 30 coming out, that's helpful. Then the work permit thing, because we've got a free ESC slot, we'll remove the work permit and we'll include the left foot needs to be very strong because I want a left footer. And so here we go. So we've got 17 guys, that feels like enough. I've set the view again to all attributes. This is linked in the description. You can download that. And it's doing exactly the same thing. And I'm going to do exactly the same approach. I'm going to take off players available for loans. We're trying to sign somebody. And I'm going to do Apple A, Apple P, or Command A, Command P, or on PC, Control A, Control P, and pull the data out. And it's exactly the same process. Pull it into our folder and then go into Python and say, look at it. So it will read it in the same way, but this time the players will be from various different clubs, and you can see that here. Here's all the players from all various different clubs, and then I can rank them by centre back. So just a quick reminder of the kind of numbers that we had. Clark Salter comes out 12.4, and then the Leicester guy, they're just about capable of surviving in the Premier League. 13.2, they have got better guys. So if we could get a 13.2, we'd feel pretty good. And if not, well, we should get close to it. And then looking at this, here's some players ranked, and we can sort of have a look at maybe the first handful. So the first guy has been asked for a move, he's at Celtic, and he's 13.4. So that looks interesting. So what I'll do is I'll copy his name, just literally select it and copy it, and then put it into the search bar at the top of Football Manager, and the player will come up. And then we can put that player into a shortlist. I'm going to call that long list. And that's an interesting player. And then there's one here, this guy called Williams, and same idea, put him in. And sorry, I did that quite quickly. I'll just complete putting that in. What I'm seeing there is a relatively low value. He's on a sensible wage, good personality. These I've just put here for convenience some physical, so he's 6'2", which just about tall enough to be maybe not the centre of our defence, but that left-sided centre back, 6'2", I think he's all right. He's got decent pace. He's potentially interesting at 12.9. Trust he's more expensive, 5-6 million, probably more than I'm going to pay at this point in the save. We haven't really got that kind of money. And this guy on loan from Leeds, we're not really trying to sign a loan player. We're looking to sign a player to keep, and then these other players are lower. So I've just quickly taken the whole game population. I've reduced it down to players that look like they're pretty good left-footed centre backs. They're above sort of minimum thresholds. They're good at all the things we want to be good at. And then we've done a quick and dirty ranking, and it's basically told me, look at these guys, Barbosa and Williams. Okay, fine, I will. And then I'll go into the shortlist. Now, what I like to do on the shortlist view, and again, these views are in the description, I like to have one for each and all of the positions. So there's the keeper, the wing back, the centre back, the midfielder, and the forward. I like to just have a view where what it does is, here's all the attributes, and they're roughly ranked in order of what's important. So according to my view of that. And so I can then just simply scan across and see what I think. And it's a little bit similar to, I will delve just into the code briefly. I don't want to get into it really closely, but if you look at the calculation of the score for a centre back. What it's doing is it's looking at things like composure, heading, jumping, marking, passing, positioning, strength and tackling, and pace. It sees those as the sort of most important, and then other things are less important, and it gives a weighting. You can look at that code if you want to, and see what it's doing. But here's Williams and here's Barbosa. If we just sort of compare the two players, then they both look pretty good. Williams probably a little bit more physical. Barbosa better in the air, but both good. Now, because I know I was making a video, I have had a quick look and had these players scouted already, so you can see the sort of scouting already there. And we've got the 3.5 stars, 4 stars. So they both look pretty good. And I can't see massive amounts to distinguish between them. They're probably both about as good as each other. But Barbosa's 29, Williams is 23. He's got 4-star potential as opposed to just 3.5 for bar space. So he could improve. And maybe if he came into the squad now, it might make some sense. And to compare to Clark-Salter, and we can then do that comparison against Clark-Salter. Is this a sensible acquisition or not? Well, yes, it is. The players are very similar profile, but better, and it's probably good enough for the Premier League. Remember, he's on the list here. He was 12.9. Don't want to be too precise about this, but that's close enough to the Leicester guy at 13.2. Clark-Salter was 12.4. That you can look at this and think, well, if we bring this guy in now in the transfer window before getting promoted, and if he plays for the rest of this season, there's a good chance this player will be good enough to play in the Premier League by the time we get there. These are like Premier League physicals in particular, just about. And we've got we do have the spare space in the squad because we've got enough English players. So maybe this guy, Williams, can fill the slot instead of Clark-Salter. And that's the approach that we can take because we've got the quantification. And that's why we're using Python like this. I mean, one thing just to say before ending the video is that some people might look at this and say, well, that kills the immersion of the game, and I can completely understand that if that's how you feel about it. Certainly, some people don't like using attributes; they prefer to use statistics, and I get that. I don't like using the statistics in the game because in order to do that well, I think you'd need to run basically all the leagues in the game and simulate everything, which I don't think we're quite there with the computing power we can use to play FM at the moment. And so for me, I don't really get out of using statistics enough enjoyment. I find I use the attributes here. It gets me closer to what I would want to do and what I want the game to do, which is to feel like you're recruiting players in real life. And maybe you've got a StatsBomb account and a Y-Scout account, and you are trying to recruit players and filter players down to a sensible number of players that you can then scout or watch or closely review and then think about bringing them into your squad. And that's basically the way that I think about recruiting players in FM, is sort of making that sort of squad building challenge. So if we look at this, the player wants 8 to 12,000 a week. Perfect. If we can get him locked in on a contract at this kind of level now, and then at the end of the year he'll be a Premier League ready player. That's exactly what we're looking for, and potentially this is the sort of player we want. So okay, he won't get a permit, but it says we've got no remaining ESC places if we bring this player in, and that's just the last point. Maybe before I finish up here is we can look at the squad building again. So yes, we've got we haven't got a spare, but I've deliberately had this forward on loan. So he does fill an ESC place, but he's only on loan. We could then use, I won't do it now, we could then go on to find a striker that can fill that position. That frees up the ESC slot, we send the player back on loan, and we sign this player to come in and play left centre back after Clark-Salter. So how would we do this transfer window? We would do those 2 transfers. We would bring in somebody who can be Premier League ready here, fill our biggest gap, and then we maybe bring someone in here. And if again we could find somebody who is at sort of Premier League level, we would do that, and that's how we would recruit. So that's the way I'm playing FM at the moment. I'm using a little bit of code. It just sort of adds an extra feature to the player search of the game. and I find that quite enjoyable. I've mentioned it to a few guys, and they say, "Well, why don't you show us how to do it?" And I've done that here. You can do anything on this player search screen. I'm not going to do it now, but if you pull data out, so you could, for example, instead of looking at a specific position, you could ask it to give you all the players with expired contracts. You can ask it to give you all the players that are 16 or 17 years old, and that's a quick way to do the best new gens in the game. You could do the same thing on a shortlist, exactly the same idea, create a new shortlist and put into that new gens. And then if you go up here, experienced FM players will know, and you go into world and you go into transfers and you ask it to give you all the new players who come into the game, and then you can take all of these players, you can put them, you go all the way down this, you'd put them into the shortlist you've just created. You can open the shortlist again that you've just created there, go to the all attributes, pull the data out in the same way, ask Python to run it, and that's a quick way to get the game to tell you what's the all the new gens that came in any given year, which one's the best at the positions. For example, there's many uses of this, and yeah, so that's how I'm playing FM. If that's interesting, interested to know, let me know in the comments. All the files I've just referred to, all the code is you see a link in the description to download that. Yeah, hope that's interesting.